So we'll start in with the topic then, which Nellie and I chose for this evening. And these are another three. And we're going to go to the three poisons, which have a certain valence to them. And they're talked about in different ways and different texts, but we've come up with a kind of greed, hatred or aggression, and ignorance are the three, ignorance or delusion.
And we chose this topic. Am I interrupting?
No, come on in.
Okay, and we chose this topic because feels like the political discourse, to me, has felt in many ways poisonous. So it has felt appropriate to where we're at now.
Right. And it is also talked about as mental states that have consequences, deep consequences through our actions. So they are something that, again, like this morning, like the knowledges, we would want to discern these three and how they're operating and what are some underlying conditions that keep them going. So we'll talk about them a bit from those angles.
And it is traditionally spoken about as mental states, but as you said that, I just wanted to go back to body mind. I don't feel like it's just all in the mind. I feel like when I feel aggression, it's very bodily. Maybe more so than the other two, although greed can feel quite, or that kind of clinging, wanting in a very intense way, can feel very bodily as well, and ignorance too.
Right. The classical interpretation does really split mind and body at different points along the way, and in the suttas and in the lists that we are also, we're always kind of adapting and saying, really, is that our experience or not?
And it also really, we're very habituated to do that. Is it mental? Is it physical? Is it emotional? As though they could be separated in experience.
Right.
But we're very prone to that. And I actually even wonder if the suttas are translated that way because the translators were prone to that.
Humans, they were humans. They are humans, those translators. And it's easier to categorize and make something into a list with a delineation, a clear delineation. That's why I like hearing about people's inner worlds. They're so much more fuzzy and messy and complex than exactly this or that.
Right, and always an experience. Well, always. I pause when I say that word. I'm not sure I agree with myself, but usually an experience of some kind of mental qualities, emotional qualities, and physical. That's experience. At least that's how we break it down into those three. We could probably break it down further. But anyway, perhaps I'm going a bit too far on this.
Well, you went far and you looked up this in AI, and we got some answers from the new AI expert that we're all experiencing when you put something into a search bar. And again, I say that cheekily, but it is give us something to bounce off of, a little bit of a different angle on the three poisons.
So starting with the first one, greed, and maybe just think for a moment. I'm going to pause for a moment. What is that? If you were AI, how would you define greed?
I like the if we were AI, yeah. Not yet, not yet.
But I think we all know what it's like when we feel that body-mind state of feeling greedy. I think we know that experience. I don't think, well, maybe, but I doubt any of us are strangers to that. But AI calls it, but we actually had to adapt the AI a little bit, I must confess, because we couldn't just take AI exactly as written. But the desire to attract and cling to what we want and what feels good. Now, this may not be good for us in the big picture or on the long view, same different words for something similar, but right now it feels good and we want it.
And the feeling of wanting something and wanting more of it. That there's a sense of, it doesn't stop with just a kind of a need for something or a pleasure. It goes into more, and then the things we do to continue it.
And of course, the words we use in our understanding and language now, you're just going right into addiction. You know, it's not enough to have, you know, one cookie, but I'd like 5 cookies, even though it might make me feel sick later. That's what we're talking about.
And we're talking about learning from the feeling sick later, that actually is a clue. This is a sign that it's really not good in the long run or in the long term. And it's not overnight that we can even accept some of those clues and understandings, right? When we feel sick from overdoing something.
And sometimes the force of greed is just too powerful. Or the biology, even taking sugar as an example, some people really can't have one cookie. I mean, there is biology behind that.
Right.
So, you know, it's more complicated, but I think we know what it's like when, despite knowing that something is not good for us, we do it despite that. And what we're saying in reflective meditation is that not feeling good is, if we can stay awake with it, can be the very thing that can start wearing away at the greed.
Right. It does come in different kind of clothes that, you know, kind of get a waking up to something that doesn't feel good. It's different in different situations. So you do have to pay attention. You can't almost just make a blanket rule and then go from that. So I think that's the other direction of our practice, is that we're looking at the underlying causes and conditions that keep us in the pattern of greed. And unable to get out of it. We're not able to break that cycle. And why and what are some of the things that keep it going?
Right. And really how much our own mental suffering and sometimes those of others is really comes out of that. And, you know, the other thing we're thinking about is that there's often an underlying need that's drawing us into wanting more and more. And so to really kind of, you know, be curious about that. Because it's easy enough to just say, oh, I'm bad, I'm an addict, I'm compulsive, you know, and slap yourself on the wrist metaphorically, rather than really look into what's going on here.
This is where the teachings, we've kind of expanded them and had the courage to say that desires and needs are different, and that we have needs is a very human, existential. We're born with having needs, that we're not looking to completely eliminate them. And I can still remember in 2017 when I felt the courage enough to say, you know, this is really important. I want to bring it into the Dharma on the equivalence of dukkha and the equivalence of the 3 marks of existence. And I still can remember the first retreat I taught that at. And really, it wasn't accepted that well. It was thought too psychological or too evident, too like, oh yeah, we know that. Yeah. But there was really something about taking it seriously and putting it into the Dharma teachings and saying that we're going to teach from this and see how that changes the Dharma.
Right. And really seeing the harm, because of course you're not, of course, but you're coming up with this understanding came out of the harm in our Sangha when the teachers, as we perceived it, the teachers' needs were not met, and what kind of harm that leads to. So really getting very directly an experience how not getting needs met can really lead to harm for yourself and others.
Right. And can really lead to projecting that harm out onto others, or those things that aren't getting met get pushed aside, and really that leads us kind of into, an aversion. There's an aversion for really humbly knowing what our limits are and what our needs are, and the kind of shame and embarrassment that can come from still having certain needs at whatever age we are. I'll say that.
Right. Well, the irony is you get older and older. When you get into old age, you have even more needs. So sort of backtrack to childhood that way. And actually not really, actually a kind of aggression can come from having needs, legitimate needs. I don't know if there's illegitimate needs, but you know what I mean? As you get older, you really can't do certain things that you really do when you're younger. And if you really can't accept that you have needs, it can get pretty ugly, actually.
Yeah. And this is the second poison, aggression, or often talked about as hatred. Like I could even consider that self-hatred, like it goes inward at times, the aggression on ourselves when we can't do something that we think we should be able to, or have done well in the past and can no longer do.
And the aggression towards people who are saying, hey, you actually need my help.
Yeah.
I'm willing to give it. And then sometimes that can be met with aggression.
Yeah. It brought me to another point that I was thinking about this, and this is a quote from a secular Buddhist teacher, from Stephen Batchelor, and he kind of came out and said, and I'm maybe quoting him a little bit off, but that our high ideals lead to aggression and violence.
Mm-hmm.
Really wanted to consider that, because we come into practice with such high ideals that end up getting worn away or more right-sized as we practice and really start to see what can we do, what are our limits. I'm kind of repeating myself. Come on in here, Nelly.
No, you're actually, to my ears, not repeating yourself. Okay. But yeah. Now you better repeat yourself again, because I lost what you were saying.
High ideals can lead
I need you.
Yes, right here. It's an example.
Yes, yes, right. And that's something that in reflective meditation, or we have a big antenna about the high ideals, and people speak them often because it's inspiring also. But it's those kind of high ideals that really, as you say, can lead to aggression. Either aggression towards yourself because you're not, meeting what you think you should be meeting. And also aggression towards others that are doing better than you on that front.
Right. It sets up a whole inside you, them comparison, conceits, envy, jealousy, et cetera, et cetera. And these are tag-alongs to the poisons, right? They're the other things that we experience when we can't be kind and gentle with our aggression. Because I don't know that we completely eliminate it. This is kind of that high ideal that I'm speaking about, and you're going like this about, no.
No, I'm going, yes, actually.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No, you can't eliminate it. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. That direction of being kind and gentle in practice, kind and gentle with our harshness, with our aggression, with our greed, and try to understand it more.
Right. And again, the causes and conditions that are keeping it going. Yeah. Right. And then the last one is ignorance, or also translated as indifference. And AI calls it the indifference to what doesn't affect us personally, but we added on the indifference to what does affect us personally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Say more about that, Nelly, if you can.
I mean, we can be very indifferent back to our needs. We can be very indifferent to our needs. We can be very indifferent to what's really, well, that's our needs. I don't know if we can get beyond needs, what really bothers us. Go ahead.
Well, what matters to us? I mean, we've started using this language like this really matters, um, dot, 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 whatever the this is. But our experience, something really matters to us. That's why we're having reactions. That's why we're triggered. That's why we're invested in something.
Right. And to really dig deeper into what really matters to us. And
Yeah.
we can easily ignore that too and think, well, things shouldn't matter. I should be more equanimous than to have things matter, but equanimity can easily go into indifference.
Good
And that
point.
is not what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, indifference has its own angle on ignorance, because part of Buddhist theory is that, you know, there's always going to be a degree of ignorance in our actions. We're never going to be 100% pure in this, that we can't know everything. We will not be able to. There will be conditions that we can't see. There will be, our views won't be refined, or really, they could be erroneous. I mean, they could take us in a wrong direction. Our views can really take us into some dangerous places.
Right. And we're not all knowing. We're not gods. We're not goddesses. We're not all knowing. We're not all seeing. We're not, and we'll never will be. And that, as you said earlier, is humbling.
Yeah.
And to really be able to be humbled by it rather than humiliated by it. It's a very different direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that humiliation is such a stronghold for acting out the embarrassment or the shame about having needs, about what we're not able to do. I just feel it's a really hard place to feel humiliated.
And sometimes the three poisons can be taken up that way. Like, oh my God, what's the matter with me? I still have greed. What's the matter with me? I can't stop thinking about the cookies. What's the matter with me? I feel hatred about how the outcome of the election. What's the matter with me? I don't want to ever read news again. I want to ignore everything from here on out and put my head,
Yeah.
but that's just turning on ourselves somewhere.
Right. So our theory, our way of looking at this is that knowing our needs is an antidote to the poisons. The traditional antidotes are things like generosity or loving kindness or wisdom, but we're really looking at this as knowing your needs, being more clear about what you need when you need it. That is the antidote that is going to interrupt the trajectory of the typical way greed will go.
Yeah, and of course you might not be able to get your needs, but at least if you know what's fueling things, you are a little wiser. A little, we're back to wisdom. You're a little wiser right there.
Yeah. So one other thing that we were talking about is that Nellie and I, and likely you all, we have had a need for a safe space to really talk about the election and the poisonous possibilities, the toxic possibilities that can come, that we could really have a safe place to be with this and to take it in, and to not have to kind of reinvent ourselves to defend ourselves against it. And that this practice has become a safe space for us to do that.
And we very carefully looked at the practice and actually made some shifts and changes to hopefully make it a bit more of a safer place to be with all of this or whatever, or what might come up, including the permission to, open your eyes and do something else if it's too much. which is one of the ways we make it. And we set up some guidelines yesterday at the beginning of the retreat to try to make the retreat environment a safer place. Never completely safe, but safer.
And our intention is that the resilience that gets developed, the being able to meet your experience that gets developed in practice, is able to be translated or taken with you as you go out into the world, as you are with your family, as you are interacting in environments that are not so safe.
Right. That is our hope and intention, that this is, and it's more than that. I feel like that's what I've heard from people already, that they're with not necessarily using the word resilience, but I heard their resilience.
Yeah.
I felt you all's not resilience, but not all the time, not such a high ideal. No. It's so easy to fall into that hole. But more so.
Yeah, and you added in another word, resilience and steadiness, that we would hope a kind of steadiness can come out of this practice, of this time together.
Which I think is a better translation or understanding, I should say, of equanimity. That there's a kind of steadiness, that rather than, being very, very reactive, and there you can sort of help, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't see it as, if something is bad for you, bad for the earth, bad for whatever, the people you love, the people who have less privilege, you name it. It's not that we should be, like steady, like, oh, la, 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 but more that we should be able to face it directly and see how we want to respond from a more steady place.
Yeah. So our prompt is, has this worked for you? Has this kind of intention to create a safe space and develop the qualities of practice? I mean, how has it worked? Have you been able to go out and take this with you? Do you know if you are able to or not? You're on retreat, so some of you might not be going out yet.
So really, has your meditation practice, has your knowledge of the Dharma, your study of the teachings, has your relationships within the Sangha, your relationships with the people in this retreat, has this helped you face the hard things? And it's not like we just started facing the hard things Tuesday night. I mean, the hard things, in many ways, I think the results of the elections are in response to the hard things that have already been going on, and people's different ideas of what a safe space is. But I won't go into my little analysis. That's really not the direction. But really, I want you to go into, how has this practice supported you? Has it been a refuge?
Has it been a refuge? Yeah.
So we're